Now let's talk about this Full Gear show. Full Gear was in Newark, New Jersey last night. They put 10,000 people in the Prudential Center, which is a great crowd. By the time we got to those final few matches, it may as well have been half that because these people were exhausted. And I can't blame them. I was exhausted just sitting in my house. I was so hopped up during the day, I could have peeled off 6 or 7 miles easily on the elliptical. I was full of energy during the day. I was feeling good. By the last third of this show, it was a struggle. And it's not only these marathon shows that they do, it's the fact that they run from one match to the next without any real break in between. It's just, they don't even bother with many replays or anything like that. I mean, hell, during some of the matches last night, there were a couple of spots in there. There was one, I want to say it was during the Takeshita match when he dropped Ricochet on top of the barricade outside, and it looked pretty brutal. And it might have been Nigel, whoever it was on commentary said, oh, yeah, we should see that again. I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's worthy of a replay. Nope, no replay. Couldn't be bothered with a replay. They just go boom, 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 and it's just on to the next. On to the next 20-minute match with 67 near falls, and it just beats you down. You know, the formatting of these shows does these wrestlers no favors. When they're out there, they're killing themselves, and nobody gives a shit. But when you have 9 or 10 matches on a show, 12 if you count the pre-show, you can't afford to have too much time in between the matches, because the last thing we need is for these shows to be even longer. So the only solution then is to not have as many matches, and that's never going to happen because that's just not what Tony Khan wants. Yeah, I told the story already of what Tony Schiavone said on his podcast. It was one of his podcasts earlier this year about Tony Khan wanting match after match after match. Even Tony Schiavone, even the people that work there have tried to talk to Tony about, hey, you know, let's have an event center segment during, you know, Dynamite. Let's try this, let's try that. And they were all shot down. He said, no, it has to be all action all the time. But Full Gear was a heel-heavy night. We had Jon Moxley retaining the AEW World title. The post-match was a huge clusterfuck. And there are good clusterfucks, and there are bad clusterfucks, but it was a clusterfuck. One thing I disagree with are the people saying that it didn't make any sense. It actually did make sense, and I'm going to defend AEW on this. You absolutely can make sense of who showed up and why. And it created a lot of chaos around the World Championship, which is something that this company sorely needs right now. So when we get to that main event, we're going to talk about that finish and the post-match, and I'm going to tell you why it was a good thing. But Moxley retains. Bobby Lashley not only beats Swerve Strickland, but does so convincingly. Another heel win. Konosuke Takeshita retains the international title. Another heel win. Kyle Fletcher gets the biggest win of his life over Will Ospreay. Another heel win. Mercedes Moné retains her TBS championship. Another heel win. And MJF beat Roderick Strong. So it was a good night to be bad. Unless you're the Costco guys. Not only was it heel heavy, but all but Moxley really won their match clean. I know Shelton Benjamin was kind of poking his nose into the match with Swerve and Lashley, but then he got ejected, and it didn't really factor into the finish of the match. So all of them really, except Moxley, they won their match clean. It's a lot of clean heel wins. You know, we get so many matches with interference and distractions in both companies. It's nice to see so many clean finishes on one show. I thought that was a welcome change. But let's start with the 0-hour pre-show. We'll go blow by blow here and get into the details. They had 3 matches on the pre-show. Anna Jay beat Deonna Purrazzo. They worked in front of half a house because people were still filing into the building, so not a lot of noise for this. I thought the match itself was fine. Buddy Matthews won a 4-way match over Dante Martin, Commander, and the Beast Mortos. This was slapped together last minute. It was very entertaining. Matthews was super over with the crowd. I don't know if there's any relevance to that being in New Jersey, but this crowd loved Buddy Matthews. And that's good because he picked up the win. And he was really feeling it when the match was over. He was milking the reaction. He was smacking hands with all the fans on his way to the back. He doesn't get the spotlight to himself very often. So he was clearly enjoying it. And then we got the real main event. Big Boom AJ of the Costco Guys against QT Marshall. This was the match that got the most promotion out of all of the matches, not only on the pre-show, on the entire pay-per-view. The Costco guys were all over the place promoting this show. And I was kind of watching it from the public relations professional perspective. It was like, man, they're everywhere. Like, you would kill to get some of the promotion that they were able to get in the lead up to this pay-per-view. You know, they hit the Tonight Show several weeks ago, and then this week they were doing all kinds of interviews. So much so that Tony Khan admitted he learned a lot from them about marketing. He called them marketing geniuses. You know, Tony's been running his company now for 5 years. He's an analytics guy. He's a stats guy. That he says he learned a lot from the Costco guys and called them geniuses. Their claim to fame is that they visit Costco and they eat chocolate chip cookies. I don't know if that's good or bad, but they do have a huge following on TikTok. So whatever they're doing obviously is working. I don't know what it says about us as a society, but whatever they're doing is working. Now, I've been cracking jokes on these guys because it's all just so ridiculous to me, but I understood the reason why they were doing it. It wasn't anything worth getting an aneurysm over. It's a fucking pre-show match with QT Marshall in there to do the job. Okay, it really wasn't anything that deep. And you know what? It turned out to be a lot of fun. Fans in New Jersey were super into it. Big Boom AJ, for those who don't know, he was an independent wrestler locally a lifetime ago, so he was already trained. He just hasn't worked a match in a while. He had one match a few years ago and nothing else dating back to 2005. And he's 20 years older now. Paul White was introduced as the special guest commentator. He came out on stage and he escorted the Rizzler to ringside. The Rizzler legitimately got one of the biggest reactions of anybody on this show. He was the special guest timekeeper. The Rizzler is an 8-year-old kid who appears in some of the Costco guys' videos, and he rubs his chin. He rubs his face like he's the most inquisitive child in the world. The absolute best part of this entire thing was every single time they would cut to the Rizzler, which was about 1,000 times, he would know that he was on camera. He was getting a sign maybe from someone off camera, hey, you're on camera. And he would quickly start scratching his face, like he was trying to make sure to keep kayfabe. At one point, Excalibur asked if the kid had fleas because of how many times he kept rubbing his face. AJ had his son, Big Justice, in his corner. They worked a very basic 1980s style match. They did not do too much. Not for nothing, Big Boom AJ, he throws a better work punch than most wrestlers do today. QT dropped him with a diamond cutter and covered him, but AJ kicked out. Marshall leaves the ring, and he makes a beeline for the timekeeper's area. He's going for the Rizzler. Paul White, though, the commentary desk is right there, so he stands up, and he scares Marshall away. AJ catches QT on the ropes. He delivers a superplex, which was the high spot of the match. Aaron Solo hits the ring. He runs distraction, ends up eating a punch for his troubles. That distraction, though, allows QT to hit a pump kick. Aaron Solo then takes the referee, and at that point, AJ's son, Big Justice, climbs into the ring. And when QT Marshall turns around, the kid spears him to the mat. And the pop that this got. This led to AJ hitting his power boom finish, which is just the power bomb, with an extra O. And no B, I guess, at the end. And he pinned QT, which was the least surprising thing about all of this. That's the only reason QT Marshall was in the match to begin with. And hey, you know what? Hat tip to him. I haven't seen QT Marshall in a match in a while. In fact, I don't think he's wrestled a single match before this since coming back to the company. But this is the best shape I've ever seen him in. I mean, he really slimmed down from what I remember him looking like. So he got himself in shape. He worked a very basic match, but a good match. You know, he did what he had to do. He knew his role, he knew his job, and he did it fine. And so AJ and his son invited the Rizzler into the ring, and they all celebrated together. The Rizzler even climbed the ropes. And again, I shit you not, he got one of the biggest reactions of anybody on this show. Is this going to bring a single new fan to the product? Probably not. But you know what? It was harmless fun before the pay-per-view went live. He didn't embarrass himself out there, and the crowd ate it up. You know what I would compare this to as a guilty pleasure? WLC. at Extreme Rules. This was basically AEW's version of WeLC. The pay-per-view itself opened with the four-way for the AEW Tag Team titles with Private Party defending against the Outrunners, Malachi Black and Brody King, and the Acclaimed. The Outrunners, they were the most over team here. Good action, with the main story coming out of it being the dissension between Bowens and Caster, which is something that's been teased recently on TV. Bowens at one point teased the handshake scissor, whatever, with Turbo Floyd. And Caster broke it up before it could happen, and the fans didn't like that. Then Caster tried to get Bowens to pin him as a shortcut for them to win the match, which is something the New Age Outlaws did once upon a time on Raw to retain their tag team titles. Very appropriate with Billy Gunn standing at ringside. Excalibur was bewildered by this, and he said, well, that's not allowed. So I'll give you one guess as to what Rick Knox did. Of course, he dropped down to the mat to make the count. But it got broken up. Apparently, nobody filled in Rick Knox on the rules. Bowens had brother Zay, pinned with a crucifix later on, but he didn't realize Max Caster had blind tagged himself in. So he was pissed off when he realized that Caster wanted the mic drop, he wanted the arrival. It all got broken up. Caster ended up eating a gin and juice from the champions, and he got pinned. So Private Party retain. That's the right call. It looks like the Acclaimed is headed for a split. That's also the right call. Look, here's the deal. The Acclaimed is not over like they were before. It was very noticeable even here when Justin Roberts was doing the ring introductions, and there was like no reaction. This is when they were already in the ring, and there was like no reaction for the Acclaimed. I mean, legitimately, they were like an enhancement team. They are not over like they were before. They're just not. And the daddy ass stuff is played out. I'm okay with a split if that's how it plays out. And I don't know that it's going to work out for either man. I don't think it's going to work out for Max Caster. I think Anthony Bowens has a lot more upside as a single star than Max Caster does. I think he's got some singles potential. Whether Tony Khan does anything with him, that's a different story. But Bowens has potential as a single. I'm okay with them trying because the Acclaimed is just flat right now. We had MJF against Roderick Strong. This was MJF's first match in almost 3 months and his first chance in a while to heel on the live crowd. He said, like Roddy, they were all white trash. And while he was out making millions and shooting movies, Roddy's mom was busy shooting his father. And Roddy chopped the shit out of him like he owed him money. MJF got Roddy's fingers at one point wedged in the metal behind the turnbuckle. He was wrenching back on the fingers, and he was stomping on the hand. This would be important later in the match. Later on, MJF mocked Adam Cole. He tried a Panama Sunrise. Strong countered into one of his many, many backbreakers during this match. Strong did hit his end of heartache finish. MJF got a foot on the rope to break the count. So Roddy tried for another end of heartache, but MJF turned it into a brainbuster, and we got a double down. Strong draped an arm over him for a 2 count, but MJF immediately spun into the salt of the earth. So we got the armbar applied, an immediate tap out by Roderick Strong. So MJF picks up the win. It was a very abrupt finish, but one that was set up by the arm work that MJF did early in the match. The announcers talked about maybe Roddy having some broken fingers or something, which is why he submitted so quickly. Roderick Strong had no chance of winning this match, and the people knew it. This felt like a TV match, and it played out like one, which isn't to say that it wasn't good, but it never felt like a big Full Gear match, because it wasn't. The big match is MJF against Adam Cole. They didn't want to do MJF against Adam Cole right out of the gate, because MJF has not been on TV. They wanted to wait until he was back, so that he could promote the match, and they could do it right, and they could do it at World's End. And that's what I expect them to do. Now, after the match, MJF brought a chair into the ring, he Pillmanized Roddy's arm, and then Adam Cole's music hit. So this fucker waited until after his friend got his arm broken and waited for his entrance music to play before running out to make the save. And he's supposed to be the babyface here. Really? Cole, Taven, Bennett, they all ran to the ring. MJF escaped into the crowd. Kyle O'Reilly also joined them in the ring to check on Roddy, and he shoved Cole down on his ass. And he started yelling at him that you were too late. Which he was, by the way. And he also talked in his promo, if you remember, on Dynamite, and if you don't, I don't blame you. But he talked in his promo about how he was worried that Cole's obsession with MJF would lead to somebody getting hurt. And in fact, Roddy did get hurt here. And I wish I could tell you that I cared about this, this Cole and O'Reilly drama, but I don't. And so the sooner they resolve this, the better. But this felt like a way to write Roddy out of the story now that he's kind of served his purpose. Mercedes Moné against Chris Statlander for the TBS Championship. Mercedes dressed down Camille in the back during the pre-show and told her to stay backstage. So Camille was not out here for this match. Camille is one step away from basically running into traffic, the way that Mercedes is bullying this woman every single week. And so they may well be setting up for Camille to be the one to take that TBS title from Mercedes, but I think they're doing more harm than good to Camille with this angle. Now, the crowd was quiet for this early, but they got them into it the more it dragged on. Mercedes was out there, and she was spamming Meteoras. I mean, she was spamming Meteoras like Brock Lesnar spams Germans. She was spamming Meteoras like me, playing 2K24, when I find that one good move that I know how to do really well. And if you've watched Sound Off Gamer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's what she was doing. I mean, it was ridiculous. I lost count after a while. I think it was 6 or 7 of them that she did. Statlander wanted a suplex to the floor early on, and Mercedes went to the eyes. She had a wild step-up Hurricane Rana off the apron. They both landed on the floor. Eventually, after all the Meteoras, it came back to bite her, and Statlander made her pay for it. Mercedes did get the statement maker locked in. Statlander powered out. Mercedes hit yet another Meteora. Statlander wanted Saturday Night Fever. Monet swung through into a spiked DDT, and then she had a meltdown when she only got a 2 count out of it. So she goes up, frog splash, but she jumps into the clutches of Statlander, who hit an F5 for a very close 2 count. So close that it was debatable. Statlander wanted a 450. She crashed and burned. Mercedes targeted the bad right knee that Statlander was selling for most of the match. She even hit a frog splash onto the bad leg. Multiple backstabbers led to the Monet Maker, but again, she only managed a 2 count. So finally, Statlander wanted Saturday Night Fever, and as she had Mercedes hanging upside down in position for it, Monet bit her on the bad leg. And then she swung Statlander forward into the ropes, 619 position. But instead of doing a move in the ropes or anything like that, she rolled her up backwards and she pinned her to get the win. Now, I know it sounds like I wasn't a fan of this because of all the Meteora spam, and I was not a fan of the finish. Despite all of that, though, I was a big fan of the match. I would go so far as to say that this was Mercedes' best match in AEW. It may have been Chris Statlander's best match in AEW, too. And I really liked her match with Willow Nightingale at All Out. Like, Statlander's had some really good matches. This may have been her best. One too many near falls for a match that was only 3rd on the card. But when everybody is going out there trying to steal the show, that's what happens. But I thought on the whole, this match was excellent. Hangman Adam Page against Switchblade Jay White. They had a great match at Wrestle Dream. I think they had an even better match here. The finish, though, surprised me. Page targeted White's ankle, which kept him out of action for 3 months. White targeted Hangman's bad leg, which he warned him coming into the show, right? That's going to prove to be your downfall. White wanted Blade Runner. Hangman went to an ankle lock, which Jay White countered into an inverted figure 4. Page followed with 2 dead eyes. White kicked out. So then Page tried for a buckshot lariat, and Jay White nearly countered into Blade Runner, but Page got the ankle lock again. This time, though, White rolled through. He got up, and he caught Page with a Blade Runner for the win out of nowhere. And as he's laying there on the mat, he's looking over at Hangman. He's smiling. He reminds him he now has 5 wins over him. After the match, White celebrated up the ramp. Page went out after him. He ambushed him. Christopher Daniels came out to stop him, and Page dropped Daniels as well and knocked him down. I liked the way they both sold injuries during the match. It was a very simple story they told. I thought Hangman should win this after losing at Wrestle Dream, but then he went and he lost again here, which is strange coming off that win in the main event at All Out. That was a big win. But this seems to be the story now with Hangman, where he grows obsessed with his opponent, right? It was the same story with Swerve Strickland, where he could not beat this man until finally he did. he's one of the few guys who can lose. And with this character that he's playing right now, I don't think it hurts him too much because we know the man is unhinged. And he's probably going to come back and do something really bad, right? So it doesn't hurt him the way that it might hurt somebody else. It's good to see Jay White getting back-to-back wins, though. Big wins. No even Steven 50-50 booking here. That should put him in line for a title match soon with Jon Moxley. Will Ospreay against Kyle Fletcher. It's a Will Ospreay match on pay-per-view, so it's no surprise that this was the show stealer. Ospreay came into this match physically compromised. He had the kinesio tape all over his neck and his traps. There was a chop battle that led to a trickle of blood to flow down Fletcher's chest. Hidden Blade got dodged. Ospreay connected with a hook kick only to try an os cutter. Fletcher, though, countered into a neck breaker out of midair. So there was a huge sit-out powerbomb that got a really close near fall. Crowd was going nuts for all the stuff these two were doing. And they tried a spot where Fletcher cut Ospreay off from skinning the cat, and they were going to turn it into a tombstone out to the floor, or maybe from the apron to the floor. They stumbled, though. And Fletcher they both fell to the floor, but Fletcher nearly got spiked right on top of his head. And Ospreay ultimately was able to maneuver him into a tombstone from a standing position on the floor. Fletcher beat the count back in at 9. As he rolled in, though, Ospreay met him with a springboard dropkick and a leap of faith. And Ospreay wanted Hidden Blade. Fletcher, though, ducked. They traded a crazy series of counters until a standing Spanish fly hit for Ospreay. Here comes the Hidden Blade. Fletcher, though, turns him inside out instead with a lariat. Ospreay, though, fires off a desperation Hidden Blade, and we get the reset. So Ospreay slides out of a brainbuster attempt with a Styles Clash. And as he rolled Fletcher back over, he just annihilated him with a Hidden Blade. And Kyle Fletcher kicked out. So now Ospreay is on the apron, and he's looking down at the steel steps. The steel steps had been moved over a little bit. They were set up earlier in the match. And he wanted a Stormbreaker off the apron. Fletcher, though, floated over. And Kyle Fletcher hit a tombstone pile driver off the apron and onto the steel steps. Let me repeat. He tombstoned the man off the apron and onto the steps. And this wasn't the finish. Fletcher said that he refuses to win via countout. He wants to show he's better than Will Ospreay. So the match ends up back inside. And Fletcher hits a reverse tombstone, which apparently he calls Grimstone. And he only gets a 2 count. So we had a tombstone on the ring steps, and then a Grimstone in the ring, and Will Ospreay kicks out. As much as I like this match, I absolutely hated everything I just described. I hated the tombstone on the steps only being a setup spot. It is so ludicrous to me. But this is how it is now. This is how wrestling is now in many places. I hate it. I hate that it's become that, but this is what it's become. Fletcher tried for a Tiger Driver. Ospreay rolled into a pin attempt for 2. Ospreay threw a Hidden Blade. Nothing was behind it, though. He collapsed. Lariat folded Ospreay up before a haluva kick led to the brainbuster on the top rope. The same move that Sami Zayn beat Gunther with at WrestleMania, thankfully. Much like Sami did in that match. Actually, Sami hit his finish and then he won, but Fletcher off of the brainbuster on the buckle, pinned Ospreay. I was waiting for the kick out. I think that would have just completely ruined the match for me. Thankfully, he pinned Ospreay and he got the win. And that is, without question, the biggest win of Kyle Fletcher's career. It is also the best match of his life. Singles match anyway. Aussie Open had some bangers against FTR. I don't know if this was better than the best matches they had, but this was excellent stuff. After the match, Mark Davis came to the ring to tend to Ospreay as Fletcher left with Don Callis. Fletcher came to the ring wearing a crown, and when the match was over, the announcer said, to become a king, you have to kill a king. And kill a king is what he did here. I thought this would go to Ospreay, but it looks like Tony Khan might be serious about pushing Kyle Fletcher. I wish I could give him the benefit of the doubt, but I can't. So I'll believe it when I see it. But they've got something in Kyle Fletcher. How far he can really go, that's going to be up to Tony Khan. But the potential is there. Ospreay putting him over, though, is huge. And the other thing I liked about this, I love the fact that there was no bullshit during this match. Outside of the spot that I described. There was no bullshit, no Don Callis involvement, there was no stupid screwdriver, no distractions, none of that. They kept the bullshit out. Not only did he beat Ospreay, he beat him as clean as you could possibly hope for. That's a huge credibility boost for him. Now it's on them to capitalize on it, so we don't look back on this in 6 months and say, hey, remember that time Kyle Fletcher pinned Will Ospreay? What happened there, right? I don't want to turn around in 6 months and say that. If you get a win over Will Ospreay, who's one of the biggest stars in the company, you better have a plan in mind for this kid. Mariah May and Mina Shirakawa had a championship champagne celebration. You know, Mariah won this title like 3 months ago. Why is she having her championship celebration now? This was never explained. Mina introduced Mariah, who was sporting a nice black eye. They're out on stage. And Mariah says there's not a single woman alive who can touch her. And she said also that she could not have done this without Mina. And the two of them toasted champagne. Mina said, long may she reign. And Mariah said it's time to celebrate. The two of them started dancing until Mina turned her back and Mariah went and grabbed the champagne bottle. And she was going to blast her with the champagne bottle, but she telegraphed it so much and she waited so long, she got caught. And Mina ended up kicking the bottle out of her hands and the bottle just disintegrated. It smashed into little pieces. Then Mariah spat on her. That fired up Mina, and she tackled Mariah off the stage, and both of them went crashing through a table down below. Actually, they landed on one table. They kind of slid off of it and went through a second table. And Mina eventually made it to her feet first. Her mouth was all bloody. She kissed Mariah's forehead, and then she was escorted away. I'll say this. It was nice to at least have a non-wrestling segment to break up the pattern of match after match after match after match. At least we had something to break things up here. And predictably, Mariah did turn on Mina. It was one of two things. It was either that or we get a Toni Storm return. There was no Toni Storm return. In fact, Toni Storm announced, for those who may have missed it, that she has retired. After losing the AEW Women's World Championship back at Wembley. And then she lost in New Japan. And she lost in CMLL. She told SB Nation this week, there's nothing left for her in the sport. She apologized to her fans for being such a failure. And she added that we will not be seeing her in AEW. We will not be seeing her in New Japan or CMLL or anywhere else. She said, I'm not used to being a loser. I have failed at everything. I lost in AEW and everywhere else. This is the last you will ever hear from me again. Enjoy Mariah May as your champion. And then she said she hasn't spoken to Tony Khan about her decision, but she said, AEW is just fine without me. Everything is going well for AEW. They don't need Toni Storm. Now, Tony Khan was asked about this at the scrum, not the scrum, but the pre-show scrum on Thursday. And he didn't play along. He said that, we'll be seeing her back at some point soon. This is the angle, though, that they're doing with her now, where she's lost her confidence and she's decided to hang it up. Once she said that, I figured you can't well have her show up 3 days later. You'll kill the angle. You got to milk it, like a cow. So Mariah turns on Mina at Full Gear. They go on now to have their match, either at Winter is Coming or World's End. And you set up a Toni Storm return in time for their Grand Slam show. They got Grand Slam coming up in Australia. It's a stadium show in February. I think it's February 15th. Toni is from the Gold Coast of Australia. She grew up there. She started training there when she was 13 years old. That's probably the timeline that we're looking at for this. And that's perfect. Because after that, after Mina and then after Toni gets her rematch, Jamie Hayter can finally get her crack at the title. Daniel Garcia against Jack Perry for the TNT Championship. It was nice to see that somebody freed Jack Perry from that chair that he was tied to in that empty warehouse. This is where the crowd really died or started to die off. You could tell, like the length of the show at this point was getting to them. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty late at this point, and I have to see Daniel Garcia against Jack Perry. I mean, come on. Matt Menard was on commentary. He was cheerleading for Garcia, who got powerbombed through the timekeeper's table. It was pretty rough, too. It's a pretty rough powerbomb. Folded him up, and Garcia's laying there like in a fetal position, and Perry buries him under all kinds of trash and debris. Now, he did eventually make it back into the ring. Perry grabbed the TNT title. He teased using it, but he tossed it down to Garcia, and he dares him to use it. Now, Garcia considers it, which would have meant a disqualification, and he wouldn't win the title, so he ends up giving the belt back to Rick Knox. That momentary distraction led to a low blow by Jack Perry, and he hits the charging knee strike. I think that's the same charging knee that he beat Bryan Danielson with in Anarchy in the Arena. And Garcia kicks out. Because there are no real finishers in wrestling anymore, unless you're Bobby Lashley. So Perry wanted another knee. Garcia collapsed. And Garcia blocked a super kick. He trapped the foot and hit a nasty pile driver. Only got a 2 count. Both men start throwing slaps. Garcia starts chopping the hell out of Perry. And Jack just smiles at him. So Garcia drops him with another pile driver. And then Garcia sinks in the Dragon Tamer, wrenches back, and Jack Perry taps out. The finish did get a big reaction from the crowd, who I think were just happy to see Perry drop the title more than anything. Again, the body of the match was quiet, but at least they got into it at the very end. This just didn't have the heat that you would have hoped for in a feud like this. But still, I thought what they put together here was good. It was time to make the move with Garcia. I mean, you had to do it either here or at World's End. But he had to win the title at the end of all this. Ricochet against Konosuke Takeshita for the International Championship. I was surprised when they didn't announce this match for the pay-per-view on Dynamite Wednesday night, but I was okay with it because I figured, okay, we have enough matches on the card as it is. So then they went and announced it on social media. They would have been better off saving this for Dynamite because they did these two no favors. The crowd was dead for this match. I actually think it would have been a different story had they opened the show with this match. I don't think it's that people just didn't like the match. Just the positioning on the show, it was death for these two. You open the show with this match, and you're going to have a crowd that's on its feet. Ricochet hit a handspring that led to a counter into a Blue Thunder Bomb by Takeshita. Takeshita crotched him in the corner and hit a release avalanche German suplex. And then a lariat turned Ricochet inside out. The power drive knee hits flush, but again, Ricochet kicks out. Takeshita goes up top. Ricochet springs up with a Hurricane Rana and then hits a Poison Rana. And again on top, Ricochet hits the Shooting Star Press, gets a very close 2 count. He tried for his Vertigo finish. Takeshita countered into the Bastard Driver for 2. He wanted the knee strike. Ricochet dodged it into a Brainbuster. Again, he went up top, but he took too long, which allowed Takeshita to land an Avalanche Falcon Arrow. And that won the match for Takeshita. He retains. This was good, but this was not nearly as good as I was expecting. Whatever it was, something was missing. And again, I think the positioning on the card had a lot to do with it. But Ricochet suffers his first defeat in singles competition. I don't know what's next for him, but it better be the Continental Classic. Because if he gets left out of that, that would be very bad. Like, his whole thing is going in there and having banger matches, right? It's all he has. Why wouldn't he be included in a tournament like this? I think Takeshita should be in there too. Bobby Lashley against Swerve Strickland. Jim Ross joined on commentary for the last 2 matches, and he admitted that when he wakes up every morning, he does the Prince Nana dance. There's a vision I won't be able to get out of my head for a while. This was Lashley's first singles match. He had a handicap match on Wednesday. He was in the ring with Cheeseburger. And I made the comment on my review. I said, of all the people for him to be in the ring with, you look at this guy. He must hate cheeseburgers. Right? I mean, he's in there with Cheeseburger. He's beating this guy up. But you look at Lashley, where he's chiseled from stone. This is not a man that goes around eating cheeseburgers. Boy, was I wrong. Little did I know, a few people informed me, that he literally travels around the country and reviews different hamburger joints on his TikTok. So I had to go watch this. And sure enough, he's got videos up there where every city he goes to, he's got somebody vlogging and following him around. And he tries the burgers everywhere he goes. I had no idea. I think that's awesome. I thought they did a good job here of making Lashley out to be the destroyer that he is. He got to showcase his power. He even used a one-armed vertical suplex on this man, the former AEW World Champion. He's holding him up there like he's nothing. It wasn't a squash, but it was a match that was able to highlight Lashley in a way that got him over in dominant fashion. It was a competitive match, but Lashley took most of it. Swerve started mounting a comeback. Shelton Benjamin tripped him up, got caught by the referee, so he got ejected. Lashley positioned the ring steps outside. He tried to power slam onto them, but Strickland sent him crashing into the post and the steps. And Strickland wanted a DDT on the apron, but it looked like Lashley missed the apron completely, and they both, well, not both, but Lashley ended up on the floor. Lashley stumbled over the Spanish announce table over in that area there. Strickland flew in with a swerve stomp off the steps through the table, which was a cool spot. Back inside, the house call kick connects. Strickland heads up top. He hits the swerve stomp, but Lashley kicked out. Lashley went outside, and Swerve got all up in MVP's face, but that delay allowed Lashley to hit a release overhead belly to belly, and then a wild spear through the barricade. Back in the ring, Lashley turned Strickland inside out with another spear, and then finally he put him away with a hurt lock. Very straightforward. And the former AEW World Champion went out. He went out pretty quickly, actually. And that was it. I was surprised that Swerve went out as quickly as he did. But if the idea was to put Lashley over strong, they accomplished that, right? The key now is in the follow-up, because this issue is not over. They need to run this back again. I'm sure they will. If they don't, then I question the way that they treated Swerve here. But you can't beat Lashley in his first match, right? He had to win this. So that was the right call. After the match was over, Prince Nana was tossed into the ring by MVP and Shelton Benjamin, who came back out. And Lashley applied the hurt lock to Prince Nana until he passed out. And all Swerve could do was just kind of grab at Nana's leg as he watched his manager go to sleep. So again, it just, the way they did this issue is not over. My guess is that we are going to, and maybe this is the Winter is Coming match. Maybe we get Swerve and Lashley in a singles rematch at World's End, but Winter is Coming. We get Lashley and MVP against Swerve and Prince Nana. MVP still works. He wants to retire probably in AEW. He's going to wrestle. He's still active in that way. Prince Nana used to wrestle. It's not like he hasn't wrestled before. So I think we're going to get that tag team match soon. And the main event, which Jon Moxley against Orange Cassidy for the AEW World Championship. And for control of all elite wrestling. Whatever the hell that means. These two guys work well together. They came into this one win apiece. They also headlined All Out last year. If you forgot about that, that was the best of all the matches they've had. They had an excellent match. Moxley won that one. Then Cassidy came back at Full Gear last year, and he beat Moxley. That match was not as good as their first, but it was still good. And this match was very good until the finish, which I thought was lame. They started hot. Cassidy immediately, right from the bell, hit 3 orange punches right out of the gate, and then a suicide dive took Moxley out on the floor. And then Cassidy got him on top of the announce desk. He mounted him. He's lighting him up with right hands. He starts biting him. Cassidy, at least I thought, played the part of somebody who saw this as a grudge match. Like, you watch him, and right from the very beginning of this match, this was a very different Orange Cassidy than we're used to seeing. Cassidy got opened up by the ring steps. It's rare that Moxley's opponent is bleeding and he is not, but I can't remember the last time I saw Jon Moxley bleed. He hasn't bladed once since turning heel. The only blood that he had on him didn't even belong to him. So this turned into a battle of survival for Orange Cassidy. Late in the match, he fired off 2 orange punches, but followed with a pin attempt. Only got 2. He kipped up for a 3rd orange punch and then hit Beach Break for another near fall. That was a callback to him winning at Full Gear last year. That's when Claudio and Pac, they emerged from the crowd, and they were about to get involved when the conglomeration ran out. Kyle O'Reilly, Rocky Romero, and Tomohiro Ishii. I got scared when I saw Ishii, and I thought we might see the learning tree sprouting up here. Thankfully, we did not. So as they're all fighting outside, the referee's attention is diverted. Marina Shafir has now entered the ring, and she has that briefcase that she's been carrying around with her. And she was about to hit Orange Cassidy with it when Willow Nightingale charged to the ring and she tackled Shafir to the floor, which got a gigantic reaction. Willow has been out with a concussion, but for those who may have forgotten or just don't know, she is part of the conglomeration. So her coming out to make the save for Cassidy does make sense. It makes sense, and now it also gives somebody for Marina Shafir to wrestle, right? We've seen people going against Moxley and Claudio and Wheeler Yuta. Marina Shafir hasn't really done anything yet other than just stand there and just randomly beat people up. Now she actually has somebody who can get her in the ring and step up to her. Cassidy got the briefcase, and he smacked Moxley in the face with it. Bryce Remsburg turned around. He counted the closest of near falls. Moxley now was stumbling around. He grabbed the referee, which allowed Wheeler Yuta to fly in with a Busaiku knee, and that led to a Death Rider by Moxley, and he pins Orange Cassidy to retain the AEW World Championship. Which probably, by the way, that explains why we had so many clean finishes up and down this show, because they were saving the cheap run-in finish for the main event. Cassidy here, he got his hope spots. The crowd was into those, at least. They weren't into everything in this match, but when they had to be, they were into the key spots. Moxley getting a tainted win was not completely unexpected, but Wheeler Yuta having anything to do with the main event, I just can't. I know he's part of Moxley's group, and he was just wrestling Orange Cassidy on Wednesday. I'm not saying that doesn't make sense. I'm just saying when it's almost midnight and we're at the end of this big pay-per-view and this big championship match, and it is decided by a run-in by Wheeler Yuta, I just can't get behind that. I'm sorry. And then came the post-match. Yuta grabs a bottle of what we were told were cleaning chemicals, and he dumps it on Orange Cassidy, and he starts writhing around, and he's choking. Then Hangman Page hits the ring, and my first thought was, what the fuck? He had a chair with him, and he hit Yuta in the head with the side of it before staring down Moxley. Now the two of them are face-to-face. Moxley's back, though, is turned to the aisleway. This was a way to distract him for Christian Cage, who hits the ring, and he drops Moxley with a kill switch. So then Page and Christian, they come face-to-face. Page picks up the contract holder that Christian has been carrying around with him now for months, the one with the guaranteed world championship match contract that he won at Wembley, which apparently is not valid until he signs the contract. What does he need, a witness? He won it in August. It's now November. Sign the fucking contract. So this was confusing. I could see where this would be confusing for people. Until I saw Christian mouth the words to Hangman, "I'll give you the first shot." And then it became clear what was happening here. Hangman Page is obsessed with winning back the AEW World Championship. He never stopped wanting the title just because Swerve lost it. He still wants to be the champion. He and Christian, they had a tag team match together on Dynamite only a few weeks ago. They've obviously formed some sort of alliance, and Christian has promised Hangman a title shot if he helps him take out Jon Moxley. That all makes sense to me. Hangman leaves the ring, and right before Christian was about to hand his contract off to the referee, out comes Jay White. He slides into the ring. He stops him from doing so by dropping Christian with a Blade Runner. Now, why would he do that? This was probably another moment where people were watching this going, what the fuck is going on here? Why would he do that? Because he promised Christian that he would get revenge on him. That's why. Who is the man that cost Jay White a win over Hangman Page in the Owen Hart tournament? That man was Christian Cage. Christian interfered in that match and he speared Jay White. Jay White never forgot that. That, and he also sustained a foot injury in that match. That was where he got hurt and he missed 3 months of his career. But that's why, since he has come back, he's gone after Hangman, and now he goes after Christian. So you can't sit there and scream that there's no storytelling in this company and then ignore the stories they tell just because you don't like them, right? Because they're not all great. But you can't complain that, oh, this is just throwing shit at the wall. This doesn't make any sense. Yes, actually it does. So White got jumped by Pac and Claudio, and the Death Riders, they flee. They were headed for their pickup truck in the parking lot when all of a sudden, as they're walking towards the truck, another car comes out of nowhere and slams into the truck. So I guess we know what Camille was doing in the back. The horrible driver that she is. No, it was Darby Allin who got out of the car only after the Death Riders beat up the valet and they stole the keys to another car and they made their getaway. Then Darby got out of his car, which was all smashed up from the collision, and he was bleeding from the head. He was screaming for Moxley. He tried to climb on top of the car. He slipped initially. Then he finally got on the hood and he starts smashing the windshield with his skateboard. And that's how they went off the air. You know full well that they probably let him do that stunt himself. Probably didn't even wear a seatbelt because the guy has a fucking death wish. What's Tony Khan gonna say? No? No is one word that Tony has probably never said to Darby Allin in his life. He just lets him go out there and do whatever he wants. There's gonna be a lot of people scratching their heads over the ending of this show. A lot of people hating probably on the ending of the show. I could tell just by some of the people who have already written into me. And I could see being confused in the moment that all of this was happening. Why is Hangman there? Why is Jay White there? Why it doesn't make sense. But it does make sense. They wanted chaos. That's what they wanted for the post-match. The Death Riders are supposed to be about creating chaos. And what they did here was establish 4 different people who want that world championship. We already know Christian has the contract. We know Darby wants to get his hands on Moxley. Now they've made it clear that both Hangman and Jay White, they want in on this as well. And White should be in line for a shot anyway because he just beat Hangman 2 straight. But Hangman's not going to let that lie. What they did was they just mapped out the next 90 days at least of the world title scene in this company. So once I realized what they were going for, I liked the finish. I liked the ending. The other thing it does is it at least tries to create enough chaos and questions to get people to want to tune into the television show on Wednesday. Wheeler Yuta helping Jon Moxley retain his title and going off the air with that does not do anything to get people to tune into Dynamite. If anything, it chases more viewers away. This at least is a way to try to get people to watch the show on Wednesday to see what's next. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's going to work, but I can't fault them for trying. I see what they were going for. So there was a lot to like about this show. You know, the main event, Ospreay and Fletcher, Hangman and Jay White, Mercedes and Statlander. Other things on this show did not hit with me. And the formatting on this show sucked. Tony has to do something about the formatting of these shows. But I thought on the whole, it was a good show. It was not a great show. It was a good show. Match quality-wise, they have set the bar very high for their pay-per-views. Now, keeping with the Death Rider stuff for a minute, Kenny Omega's in-ring return was made official this week. He's going to be wrestling Gabe Kidd on January 5th at the Tokyo Dome Wrestle Dynasty. That is New Japan's version of Forbidden Door, which isn't forbidden at all anymore. It's like a revolving door. I mean, we've got fucking Ishii wrestling Chris Jericho this Wednesday for the Ring of Honor World title. What Forbidden Door? What are we talking about here? But I talked about Kenny's comments last week from that Fightful interview where he claimed that nothing is wrong with AEW right now. Everything is great. They don't really have a need for Kenny Omega right now. Right? The most delusional thing he's ever said. But I'm starting to wonder if this is not part of a wider story that they're planning on telling as it relates to the Death Riders. Because it was very curious when right after Omega made those comments, Toni Storm said something very similar to SB Nation. She said AEW is just fine without me. Everything is going well for AEW. They don't need Toni Storm. Then there was Eddie Kingston on a podcast last week who said, to be honest, AEW right now doesn't really need me at this point in time. They are doing their thing. I think having me around right now may mess up some plans, which I like doing, but also trying to be a company guy, you don't want to mess up the plans too much, especially when it's good. I don't know what's going on with Mox. I haven't talked to him in 3 or 4 months. I don't know what's going on with him with this whole Darby thing. He's doing his thing. I have nothing against what he's doing. I'm not needed right now, I don't think. It's a little suspect that all 3 of them had very similar comments in the span of a week. Are they telling a story here that is going to play itself out in the next few months? And we start seeing some of these new, well, not new, but some of these AEW faces returning to try to take down Jon Moxley, right? Eddie is not going to be able to wrestle for another 6 months, but that doesn't mean that he can't show up on TV in the next 3. I mean, it has to happen at some point that you get some of these bigger names back to try to rescue the company from whatever Jon Moxley is doing. Are these the names that are going to be coming back to help do that? And by the time they do, will this angle even be viable anymore? We saw how the Elite stuff went. That died off pretty quick. Who knows where this Death Riders thing is going to be in 3 months or 4 months? Could be on life support.